15, 20 minutes. I talk a lot.
You talk a lot. Well, I'll try to keep you in. All right, we're live. Say hello, James.
Hey, welcome everybody, and thanks so much for the alligator pin.
You're welcome.
You mentioned it. It's hopefully to give me the alligator skin so everything bounces off. I need that right now.
James, thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
joining
having
us.
me on the show.
I said we're live. We're actually not live. This is going to be, we're pre-recording. It's going to go July 1st, so this will be episode number 60 of the Closer Club. My name's Alex Vidal. I'm president of Related ISG International Realty. And we have James Altucher, who, well, let me just tell you a little bit about this guy. Best-selling author, entrepreneur, hedge fund manager, venture capitalist, podcaster. He's actually got a killer podcast. Ranked chess master. My favorite, though, stand-up comedian. James, tell him a little bit about, if you can give us the Cliff Notes version. I know you like to talk. Cliff Notes version, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I've done, I've been an entrepreneur for, let's say, 25 years. So I've started maybe 20 different companies, almost all of them failures, 3 or 4 good successes that I'm proud of, that I worked really hard at, and many times where I just, after making tons of money, generations worth of money, I just completely was stupid and collapsed to zero, and I kind of had to bounce back each time. And there was one time I was like, just forget it. I can't do it anymore. I'm tired of trying to please everyone. Everyone hates me anyway. It's like the 4th or 5th time I've lost everything. And so I moved out of the city, so it'd be a lot cheaper for me because I was really like dead broke. And I just started writing all my experiences of going broke and bouncing back. And people would write to me, like my friends would write to me like, are you crazy? What are you doing? No one's ever gonna want to invest in any of your businesses again. You're writing about all your failures. And this was before, I think, what I call failure porn became popular, where everybody now is like, oh, I failed, so now I should succeed. But like, everybody thought I was insane. Like, people said to me, like, do you have a brain tumor or what's going on? And but I started to, I was really focused on writing well and writing these honest stories about what happened to me and how I attempted to bounce back, and the times I was successful at bouncing back, and people really appreciated it. And some people said, oh, are you now writing self-help? And I said, no, I'm really just writing my stories, but I'm writing the specific techniques I use to bounce back, so you could do with it what you want. And that's really still, to this day, my focus.
Now, looking back, because you have made millions, we talked about this off camera, made millions, lost it, made it several times over. If you were to look at what are the common denominators among, and maybe, I don't know if you've done this or not, but if you were to look at when all the times you were successful, what were those common denominators? And when you failed, what were those common denominators?
Sure, and that was something I was really interested in, because I remember one time I was once again broke, and I had 2 houses right next to each other, and I had a hammock in between them. And I was lying in the hammock, and I was thinking, how could I have done this again? Like, I've gone broke so many times, it's practically statistically significant. Like, I could learn lessons from this. And then I remember just thinking about this, depressed, and it starts raining, and I've got for sale signs on these houses, and the state, property taxes were like, put signs on the houses. It was just miserable. But you're right, there was things that were common on the way up and things that were common on the way down. What was the common theme on both was, and it was so simple, that's why I don't say this is like self-help or anything, it's because everybody has something different, but what are you doing for yourself in terms of physical health, emotional health, creative health, and spiritual health?
That's my next question.
Every single day.
Okay.
So it's got to be every single day. By the end of the day, what did I do to help myself improve even just 1% physically, emotionally, and by that I mean, trimming out bad relationships or toxic relationships and improving good relationships. Creative health, did I exercise those creative muscles so that, as I need them, I'll have ideas? Because you can't just come up with a magic idea. You have to practice coming up with ideas. And then spiritual health is just that simple thing of like, it's not like, it doesn't mean prayer or religion. It just means, hey, you can't control everything in life. You have to don't waste energy trying to control everything in life. Have a sense of surrender to things you can't control, so you have time and energy to focus on the things that you can control. And I'll add, just on the physical health thing, you can't have great ideas or execute on them if you're sick in bed. Sure. So physical health is important to just have energy. Energy is like the key to living. We're animals. If we don't have energy, we'll die or
Sure.
sleep all day. And if we have energy, we can be creative and have ideas. Spiritual health is too. It's more about energy. Don't waste time on the things you can't control. Just only spend energy on the things you can control. Emotional health is energy too, because if you're constantly arguing, let's say, with a friend or a spouse or a boss or a colleague, you won't have energy. You won't be happy.
We were talking about that off camera.
Yeah, you won't be happy to do the things that you love and that you obsess on and that you could be creative on. All of this is to gear it into being creative and then being able to execute on that creativity.
So when you look, would you say that when you were on the highs, that's when you were most focused on the physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual, and when you were on the lows, you kind of took your eye off the ball?
Yes, I would say I would make all this money. Let's say I would make $15 million cash, sell the business. I was doing great. I would be like, man, I did it. That was my goal as a human being. I don't no longer have to work towards being a quality human being anymore. I could just start spending that energy I built up because I made it. And what happens is you don't just lose energy, or you don't just whatever. You get stupid, you get weaker, you don't have the energy to execute. You think you're smarter than you are, and bad things start to happen. Like really bad things start to happen. And for me, I would lose all that money. Wouldn't it be like, 15 million down to 2. It'd be 15 million down to $143.
Dollars.
Yes. Yeah. So it was just a nightmare. And it wasn't like consciously, I would say, physical, emotional, creative, spiritual. But when I started consciously, when I look back and I said, but that's what was happening. When I consciously started doing it, and I made it a point, well, what's 1% a day improvement in each of these things? Then it was like a rocket ship more than any other time before in the past. When I consciously was doing this, that's when I was most successful by far.
Got it. And when you took your eye off the ball, crash and burn, here you go.
Yeah, well,
complacency.
Since I've started consciously doing it, I have not taken my eye off the ball.
Awesome.
So that's worked for me.
Now, I mentioned in the intro that one of the things I love most about you is the stand-up comedy. Something probably most people wouldn't know about. How did you get into that? But more importantly, what lessons did stand-up comedy teach you about business that you're using today?
It's a great question, because people often don't understand what stand-up comedy is. Like, some people say, well, you were funny. Why did you have to just do stand-up comedy? It's not about humor, although that's a component of it. But first off, to answer your question, I always loved stand-up comedy. I used to work at HBO in the 90s. HBO was the biggest player in comedy. I'd go to all the comedy festivals. I'd go to stand-up all around town. Many people who are like household names today, I would see them at literally what's called open mics, like beginner,
Sure.
amateur nights at comedy clubs, or just in the back of a bar somewhere doing comedy, and now they're all famous movie stars today. And I was so desperate, like I wanted to do this, I loved it, I wanted to do it, but I was terrified. It's like a terrifying thing. Like, I even ask actors who aren't stand-up comedians, you're funny, you should try stand-up comedy at the club that I own. And they're like, no, I can never do that, it's terrifying.
Right.
So there's an extra...
Because they can cut and repeat, right? You can't retake on a stand-up comedy act.
Yeah, you have to... The stand-up comedy act, there are so many other factors than just saying your act. Like, you have to actually specifically not seem like you have an act. You're engaging a crowd, and every night the crowd's different. And so you have to figure out within microseconds, who is this crowd? Is it New Yorkers? Is it tourists? Is it half and half? Is it drunk people? Is it sober people? Is it men? Is it women? What's the demographic? Did they laugh at the last comic? Did the last comic have a lot of energy or low energy? Like, all these factors. And then after your first joke, how did they interact? Which side of the room interacted with me? Which person? Is there a problem in the room? You have to in microseconds calculate everything, and your act shifts and changes
Sure.
on the basis of that. So it's not like one act that you write down and say. And I've learned a lot of skills, difficult skills in my life, and I really sort of really studied the process of learning how to learn. So, for instance, when I was a kid, I wanted to learn, it sounds stupid, it's a kid's game, but I wanted to learn chess really fast. And then when I wanted to learn other things really fast, like computer programming or investing or entrepreneurship or sales or stand-up comedy or poker or writing, I would say, well, okay, what did I learn learning how to learn, on the way to becoming a chess master? How can I apply it to this new thing? So stand-up comedy, I sort of said, okay, there's no skill at stand-up comedy. There's humor. There's being likable on stage. There's crowd work. There's stage presence. There's improvising. There's coming up with premise, punchline, jokes. There's interpreting today's events or minding my life in some humorous way. There's storytelling in a funny way. So there's all these micro skills that are exclusive of each other, and I wanted to get good at each one. But I'll tell you the ways it specifically
helped you in business.
Helped me in business is that when I give a talk now, like I've been public speaking for 20 years, and I've always been a humorous public speaker, but now that I bring, I don't do stand-up comedy when I do public speaking, but now that I have that skill set, my public speaking has gone up easily 10x because I am so much more, it's like you have x-ray vision now on the crowd. So I can directly compare before and after. It's like I can completely see the crowd, who's in the crowd, what do they want, who's responding to me, who is responding to what. I can improvise much better based on what is making the crowd happy, what is making the crowd not necessarily laughing, but what is making the crowd learning more from me. Because in the public speaking, you're trying to educate an idea onto the crowd. And so my public speaking has got so much better. My sales has gotten so much better because human beings, the evolutionary reason for laughter is to release tension in very difficult situations. Right. Sales is a somewhat tense situation, so humor or the elements of stand-up comedy help relieve the tension. The other thing is this persuasion, or I'll use a different term for it, frame control. So when you're in stand-up, when you're the comic on stage and there's a crowd, either you're in control of the room or the crowd is in control of the room. Yeah. If the crowd is in control of the room,
you're screwed.
You're dead. And you're completely dead. You cannot get back the room. Yeah. So controlling that room is extremely important in sales, negotiating, motivational to employees, motivational to bosses, motivational if I'm writing. Sure. So all these other skills where previously I had some sense of what persuasion was about, but now I viscerally know, even if I'm on TV and there's two anchors and there's two people on the panel and me, I will view that as like a crowd and I'm going to control the frame. Yeah. Or else, and the anchors, they know how to control the frame. I have to do it better than them. Yeah. So it's difficult. But stand-up comedy is so difficult, and I've learned it, so well by studying it in the way I learned how to learn. That's really helped me. And that's just the big tip of the iceberg.
And I don't think people realize just how much preparation goes into stand-up comedy. If you follow, actually, we're talking about Joe Rogan and Kevin Hart have a great podcast together. And you hear Kevin Hart and what he goes through before he releases like a Netflix special. It takes him 2 years before he even gets it.
Absolutely. And I will say on nights when I'm doing stand-up comedy, the whole day is, now I'll still do my responsibilities, my business, my writing, but the whole day, the schedule of the entire day, even the night before, is determined by the fact that I'm doing 12 minutes of stand-up comedy to a room full of strangers the next night. Because you have to start planning it really 24 hours in advance. And that doesn't include the time spent writing material, reviewing my old material. I take videos of each set and I study them. There's so much preparation involved. I study other comedians. Okay. I rest, I relax, I think about the jokes I'm going to use. I think about, well, if the crowd's like this, or it's a Wednesday night, what's different about that than a Saturday night? Or I'm not feeling so well, so what should I do to balance how I'm feeling? Sure. It's just, out of all of these skills, it's the hardest I've ever learned, which means this helped me in investing. Again, it's helped me in entrepreneurship. It's helped my chess playing, because in comedy, one of the keys is you have to learn how to surprise people. When you play a game, the way you win is surprising people. So
I've never played chess. So.
Poker, the only way to win at poker is you have to surprise. You have to make the move that's unobvious. You have to go to the place, in entrepreneurship, you have to go to the place least crowded to avoid competition. So even when you're developing your voice in comedy or writing or journalism or whatever, or sales, you have to go to the place least crowded, and it's a common skill across all of these things.
Now, you have a great philosophy that's the plus minus equal philosophy.
Sure.
Tell us about that.
So, and again, this is the way to learn this is another way to learn any skill,
Okay.
which is, and it's so critical. The plus is, who do I admire? Who it could be a mentor that's in real life, your teacher or professor or boss or physical mentor, or it could just be, I admire, like when I was playing chess, I admire these chess players, these 5 chess players. So I'm going to study all of their games. I'm going to study their style. I'm going to try to imagine how they're thinking. I'm going to look at their games and try to guess what's the move they would make. My heroes, the best players in history. Or comedy. I'll look at Dave Chappelle and what is he doing here? And then I'll try to mimic how he's doing it. What did he do with his voice just then? Why did he smoke the cigarette just then? Why did he hit the mic on his knee just then? Why did he pause just then? Think about everything, and that's the plus. Those are the people you admire and you try to mimic or get mentorship from or whatever. You need a bunch of pluses. Then the equals are, there's always going to be people at the same level as you. These are the people like you'll trade notes with, like, you tackled, you're a computer programmer, you tackled that problem this way. I was using this language. Maybe I should try that language. I was using this database. Maybe I should try the database you're using. Oh, I did it in this way. You tried doing it parallel. I'll try that too. So the equals, we're all facing the same problems. We're all in the trenches together, and we're moving up together, and we help each other.
Okay.
So you learn a lot from your equals because you're not intimidated by them like your pluses, and they have valuable information as opposed to the minuses. Minuses are people you teach. Now, there's several interesting things about that. One is, if you can't explain something to somebody who's, let's say, a layman or a student, then you really don't understand it yourself. So you have to explain something in a really simple manner, and that's how you prove to yourself that you understand it. But also, they will ask you questions that are so basic, but you're like, I didn't really realize I didn't understand that basic thing yet, or I didn't understand it enough. So working with the minuses on helping them understand fundamentals teaches you the fundamentals at a deeper level. I'll just give an example from
I actually love that a lot.
I'll give you an example from chess. So a very famous world champion from the 1930s, Jose Capablanca, from Cuba, prodigy from the age of 4 on, best player in the world when he lived. He wrote a book while he was world champion. So the best player in the world. He wrote a book called Chess Fundamentals, where he himself realized, I need to get back to the fundamentals, and he just explains the basics of what's important to him in chess. And that, just having that understanding and that beginner's mind, that student's mind, that, hey, I always need to be a student, I always need to be curious about myself, that's what the minuses teach you, and you teach them. And it's also, in addition to it being a good thing, paying it forward.
All right, so I'm ready to be a minus. Okay, because I obviously, this is episode number 58 of my podcast, but you have your own show, the James Altucher Show. So I'm curious, why did you start it? What have you learned about hosting your own show? And how did it break? I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of podcasts. What did you do to break it out to be one of the top?
Well, those are several good questions, but so I'll start with why I started it. Probably similar reason to you. Like, I wanted to, like the other day, I read a great book. And I'm like, this is a great book, but I have some questions. There's some things I might agree with, but I want to know more. And there's some things I disagree with, but the author might have an answer why he did it this way. So I called up the author and said, hey, love your book. Can you come on my podcast?
Okay.
And, they want to come on the podcast because it'll help them promote the book. But then I selfishly get to ask all those questions.
Sure.
Or let's say I want to call William Shatner, Captain Kirk from Star Trek, or Henry Winkler, the Fonz from Happy Days, or Judy Blume, one of my favorite writers when I was 10 years old, or Coolio, one of my favorite rappers, or Richard Branson, an inspiring billionaire, Tony Hawk, the best skateboarder in the world, Garry Kasparov, the best chess player in history. What if I wanted to call all of them and say, hey man, how'd you do it? Like, they'll come on and I get to ask, how'd you do it? This is like a bucket list moment. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the best basketball player in history. There's a lot of tall people. How'd you do it? like what was, and by the way, Kareem, why do you never smile? I've looked at 3,000 photos of you. You never smile in one of them. and it's just, you get to ask whatever you want. They're captive for like an hour or two. So it's such a pleasure it's like every day is like a new bucket list moment for me. I get to talk to who? Oh my gosh, Captain Kirk, or, the best poker player in the world, the best businessman in the world, all these billionaires, all these comedians, actors, everybody.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
So many bucket list moments. I'll just tell you one time, and I took a photo of this, or Jay took a photo of this. Gary Kasparov, the best chess player in world history, who I was a fan of when I was, a kid, he comes in. So I called up beforehand the Jizza from the Wu-Tang Clan. I made, all their websites in the 90s. I was just a mega fan of theirs, and my first company built their websites. And I called up Jim Norin, a famous comedian. We grew up together. I knew the Jizza and Jim Norin were into chess, so I said, hey, Gary Kasparov's coming over. You guys come over too. Called up Maria Konnikova, who's on her way to being a professional poker player, but she wrote a great book, Mastermind, How to Think Like Sherlock Holmes. She's been on the podcast. So it was a picture of just all of like these heroes of mine in one spot and us just laughing together. The podcast has given me that. And I used to wonder, what am I learning? I've done 500 podcasts now. What have I learned? But then I couldn't, sometimes you can't like just sit down and write a list. But then I realized throughout the day, almost everything I was doing was based on things I've learned from these 500 guests. Like, it was just naturally
you need to write a book about that
incorporated into my life. Yeah, I do, and I've kind of written somewhat about it, but it's like almost everything I do is naturally incorporated now into that plus minus equals. It's from Frank Shamrock, who was a mixed martial arts champion of the world in the 90s.
So I have two questions off of that. Did you play the chess champion in chess?
Yes, I
lost. On camera?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube? All right.
Yeah.
And so what did you do to get it to take off?
So I had already been writing for 15 years. Okay. I've been writing for 25 years when it came time to starting the podcast. But I've been writing professionally, like for money, for about 13 years at that point. And so I already had an audience. And the audience, and I'd written best-selling books by this point, meaning books that had sold, altogether my books had sold millions of copies in dozens of countries. And so I already had a built-in audience. I had social media followers. There weren't that many podcasts then. Again, you want to go to the place least crowded. There was maybe a few hundred podcasts as opposed to 1 million podcasts. And then, of course, you want to anchor yourself with authority. So my first couple of guests I knew were other people who had big audiences that weren't necessarily overlapping with mine. So I had Wayne Dyer on, probably the biggest self-help author in the world. He sold 200 million copies of his books. He's unfortunately passed away now, but he was one of my first guests. I had on Robert Greene, who wrote 48 Laws of Power, one of the best-selling recent nonfiction books, and he's also written Mastery, many other books. I had on Tucker Max, who wrote, he created this genre of fratire. He was famous for, he had, the book, I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, probably sold 3 million copies. So I had people like Gary Vaynerchuk, Tim Ferriss, who, are popular among kind of the entrepreneurship crowd, and that overlapped with my audience, but it cemented, that audience for me. And so right away, I was able to bring in a large variety of audiences. I had Tyra Banks on, a completely different audience, had Wolfgang Puck on, completely different audience. So you want to bring in people who, like, I'm not a business podcast, I'm about peak performance. So I want to have everybody from all walks of life, but that serves the purpose of messaging my ideas and my way of preparing, and Wolfgang Puck, for instance, is happy to share with his audience the podcast with me because I asked him unique questions that maybe a cooking podcast wouldn't. So his audience gets something new.
Got it. Now, so going on that, because my last question always is about book or podcast, like TED Talk recommendation, but I'm going to come back to that for a minute. Being that it was something new for Wolfgang Puck, this kind of leads into my second to last question, which is, what's something we'd be surprised to know about you that is not already out there?
I've been so revealing in my articles. On my blog, I have maybe 3,000 articles that I've written just since 2010, and I've been writing since 1990. And each one of those articles tells another story about my life. Yeah. So sometimes I wonder, like, what am I gonna do? Like, I can't keep writing, oh my gosh, I lost millions of dollars. Here's how I come. That story now I've written, and I've sliced and diced it in many different ways. I even wrote part of it today in a slightly different way. But so I'm always trying to come up with new stories, and that leads to revealing more and more things about my life. I guess one thing I've written about, which I've only talked about a little bit recently, because it's a little bit not obvious, is that as a kid, I was very close to being a professional breakdancer. So,
really?
Yeah, so that was, and I still do that. Here I am, 51, been doing this since I was like 13. I still do some amount of that every single day. And
now, wasn't Jesse Itzler, and I know you talked about having him on the show, wasn't he a breakdancer as well?
Yeah, he was, he was a rapper.
Oh, that's right, he was a rapper.
At the time, and I'm sure he could do a little bit of breakdancing, but at the time, there were two white rappers. It was like 1992. It was Vanilla Ice and Jesse James, who was Jesse Itzler. And in that, kind of battle of the minds, Vanilla Ice won out. Of course, Jesse Itzler went on to bigger and better.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so my last question always is book, podcast, or TED Talk recommendation. But you answer kind of you haven't done a TED Talk. I haven't seen it at least.
I've done TEDx Talk.
You have done TEDx?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about what's your favorite of yours. What's your favorite book? Tell them where they can find your podcast and tell them about your TED Talk.
Sure. I shouldn't say. I actually, so I've written 21 books.
Yeah.
I probably like 4 of them.
Okay. What's your number one?
Choose Yourself.
Okay.
Which is basically kind of the story of that first time I lost everything and bounced back, and why I think it's important in this economy to say no to the gatekeepers. Every day we are confronted with people who say no to our dreams, because they should say no to our dreams. They have their dreams, and their dreams are not our dreams. They're doing their thing. Yeah. And so whether it's professors, parents, colleagues, bosses, the government, society, some of these things are cultural. Like, you can't do that. That's not what you're supposed to do in life. You have to go to college and graduate school and buy the house and get the white picket fence and work there for 40 years and retire with the gold bars. It used to be the traditional script. Now it's changing. But in any case, or if you wanted to publish a book, you typically think, well, in order for the book to be successful, or in order for me to have credibility, I've got to get an agent, then a publisher, then be on the bestseller list and get in all the bookstores and be in the airports. But there's new scripts now for everything. You get to choose what your script will be for success, and you'll find much greater success if you choose what you do.
So that's in Choose Yourself.
Yeah, and I just want to add,
please.
Sometimes people say, well, that sounds like I'll be doing selfish things. I don't want to do the wrong things. I want to be a good person. No, all I said was choose yourself. If you're saying by choosing yourself you'll be selfish, that's on you. That's not on me.
Got it.
Me choosing myself, I feel I'm the best person I can be.
And I did experience that. So I run a pretty big company, and I bought a pickup truck. I actually have a Ford Raptor pickup truck. You can't have a pickup truck. You can't pull up to events in a pickup truck. I'm like, why not? Because you're the president of the company. I'm like, what do I give a shit what the other people think? I'm buying the pickup truck because it's what I want to drive. They're not paying my bills. They're not driving the car for me.
Right. They're not paying your bills, and they, people are gonna. You can't control what other people think of you. You have to do your thing and be successful at it, and that will create true success and freedom.
There you go.
So the book, Choose Yourself.
Okay. Podcast is the James Altucher Show.
Podcast is the James Altucher Show.
I loved what you said so much. That was like a mic drop right there.
Yeah. But they're all kind of variants on the same theme. So yeah.
James, thank you so much. I really
Alex,
appreciate it.
thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you guys off the camera for setting this up. I appreciate it.
Steve, Robin, Jay.
Yep, and thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right, say bye to the camera. We're done.
That's great, Alex. Yeah. That was amazing.